Yes, Dr.
Hi,
Uzma.
everybody. Yep, thank you very much, Jacob. Thank you. Hi, everyone. We would like to introduce our weekly live discussion for Autism Awareness Month. The lives will be taking place every Tuesday at 4 p.m. UAE time. Race and Uzma Akser Coaching are collaborating this month to support Autism Awareness Month and share first-hand experience and stories from the community and how we can all work together for a more inclusive society. In today's live, we would like to introduce Dr. Shereen and Professor Eman. So welcome on board, guys.
Hey, hello.
Dr. Shereen, hi everyone. Hi. Dr. Shereen has recently obtained her PhD in psychology from the University of Edinburgh in the United Kingdom with a focus on autism, bilingualism, and learning skills. She has since relocated to the UAE, her birth country, to drive new autism research and public engagement agenda within a neurodiversity framework. Furthermore, Dr. Shereen has 10 plus years of experience as an autism support worker and grew up with a younger autistic brother, who became the first autistic child in the UAE to receive formal mainstream school inclusion in graduate high school. As such, she brings forth a personal, practitioner, and research background in autism. We're very happy to have you on board, Dr. Shereen, today. And we have Professor Eman here. Professor Gaad is the Dean of Faculty of Education and a Professor of Special Inclusive Education at British University in Dubai. Professor Eman is an honorary fellow at the international reputed University of Birmingham in the UK. She is a sound academic, an external PhD examiner for many universities in the UK, and is recognized international scholar in the field of special and inclusive education. Thank you guys for being on board. I will first go with my first question I have here, and for both of you. We're curious to know, and I'm sure the audience here is also curious to know, what work you're currently involved in and what the field of inclusion looks like for you guys. Professor Eman, please.
Yeah, okay, fine. Well, I'm involved in so many things. Advocacy mainly, it never stops. It's like a wheel that just goes around. And with maturity, because there is so many people interested to advocate, but it's always good to look out for the positive messages in advocacy, the negative messages in advocacy, and with an eye on what is the best interest for people, who are most affected by the spectrum and by disability in general. On another note, obviously, as a researcher, I'm from a British University, Dubai, which is a research-based university. We look at the latest cutting-edge research in inclusivity. The whole debate about inclusivity: is it working? Is it not working? What is the best? What are the best practices that revolves around the child and the child-centered approach when it comes to inclusivity? People now are interested also. I'm particularly interested in mental health and the disability and effect of parental attitude towards a child having a child with disability and effect of disability when it comes to parents as well. So many things. A project with the Community Development Authority in the government of Dubai, where we are actually licensing professionals, who are seeking assistant psychologists or assistant learning support assistant, and also those who would like to take the professional exams to raise the standards among the professionals serving people with disabilities. So this is what I'm involved in. And of course, the everyday business of graduating doctoral students and master's students, etc.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And we move on to Dr. Shereen.
Hi everyone. So I, as Uzma mentioned, recently located from the UK to the UAE, which is my birth country, to drive a neurodiversity agenda in the mix of like just research, but also like community engagement, and specifically working with the third sector. So the kind of projects that I'm involved in, as I mentioned, focus on neurodiversity. So this idea that there are brain differences between people and that these differences are natural. There's just like a natural variation across all species. So kind of honoring these differences and then kind of like trying to find how we can apply this to different groups: autistic, ADHD, dyslexia. So I'm involved in research projects that basically, I mean, there's just like so many, but the latest one that I'd like to highlight is a project that I did with Etisalat UAE. And the focus of that project was to create a wider web that is more accessible for people who see the world differently. So that could include autistic people, those with ADHD. What that means basically is that, you know, we go online every single day. We access the web with, you know, I mean, like it's just a very straightforward thing for us. Maybe the biggest issue that we can face is something like the connection's not so good. Maybe an issue working the technology, but otherwise we're fine. Whereas people who are autistic can sometimes get really overloaded with sensory triggers, the colors, the fonts, the ads, the pop-ups. So I partnered with Epsala to create a technology that basically is an extension that can convert any web page into a more autistic friendly, neurodivergent friendly space. So a web page like Facebook, as soon as you open that up, so you know the pop-ups wouldn't be there, the fonts would be clearer, the layout would be more organized. So just the kind of projects that can really make a difference in the day-to-day life of autistic people and also those who are neurodivergent. So that's an example of a neurodiversity project that recognizes that people are different. We appreciate these differences because you know they are associated with some strengths, and we want to empower those people with new technology, new resources, so that they can access the same things that we access on a day-to-day basis, but in a more suitable fashion. The projects that I'm interested in are things like social communication when it comes to autistic people, social intelligence, as well as working with working with the third sector and policymakers in the UAE on how we can make adjustments in our healthcare and our aviation to make it more suitable, more accessible for the day-to-day experiences of autistic people. So yeah, I'm a neurodiversity researcher, working on research, community engagement, and public policy agendas in the UAE.
Wow, that's amazing. You guys are so busy doing such amazing and wonderful work in the community, and having you on this platform today is really such a big honor, really it is, and having, you know, an opportunity to share what you're doing with our audience today. I just want to move on to why you have such a strong interest in autism and the special education needs, and especially focusing on inclusion in education should look like.
Um, should I go? Basically, I can't even remember when I did not have an interest in inclusivity and inclusive education. Inclusive education is actually an area that is very close to my heart. And I took it as a career. And I was always puzzled about the true meaning of inclusion, because inclusion means different things to different people. And cross-cultural studies actually showed this. But I took an interest when I was a teacher back in the UK, actually. At those time, I'm not going to tell you when, because that will tell you how old I am, but it was very, very, very long time ago, where actually people were doing integration, and I worked in a special school teaching PMLD, or fundamental learning disabilities. And there was a class with some children on the spectrum, and at that time they were really not proper diagnosed. The terminology was different, and we basically just sat there. They just sat there. We were babysitting them, really. We could not decode the code. We couldn't understand what to do with them. And then when here comes the integration, and we used to take a couple of the students and go, what we call it, the educable at that time, taken, which is a horrible term, basically, because everybody is educable. We take some of them to go to the mainstream school for a day, and then come back and just share the extracurriculum activity, and maybe share the assembly time and come back. They were not really allowed even in the classroom at the time. So I started to develop a passion based on what exactly are the abilities of those minds, because nobody knew. And you could see them when they are interested in something, they would really go, and nothing can unstoppable. And when they are not interested in something, they basically. So the puzzle of autism has always been, interesting to me. And then I did my PhD in developmental disabilities, Down syndrome / also autism, etc. We're looking at where in the brain is autism. And listening to Shereen talking about how neurodiversity now is booming. 25 years ago, nobody looked at neurodiversity, as something that we can look at when it comes to how everybody is different and how the individualization of individuals. So I've always been interested in inclusive education. And then when I came to the Emirates, I remember, I was looking for people. This is back in 1999, and where is everyone? So I could not see in a society where the society is made from different people, and I could not see, for example, people with Down syndrome, and Down syndrome was the leading cause for, at that time for intellectual disability, etc. People with autism were at that time not really put in a place um, where they could be empowered. So I started, to look at the academic in me would and the researcher in me would look at what are the latest trends and issues, and the teacher in me was frustrated because I knew that we could do something in the regular classroom to support every child, and of course the human being in me and the mother in me was always wondering, how is it like to mother or to father a child with autism, was at that time what is limited there. And I just spend my life hovering around trying to do difference, only a tiny part, as we say.
Wow. So you've seen the transition from, 25 years to now.
I did, and I had the honor to be one of the people who reviewed policies. For example, when the federal law for 2006 came up, for example, I was one of the people they sent us to review. So I saw it being cooked in the oven, and then the people of determination national policy, and of course the amendment of 20. Law number 29 for 2006 to law number 14 for 2009. I was also appointed as the first director of disability service in the government of Dubai to lay down the foundation. So this gave me as an advocate to be put in the government sector to actually lay down this foundation. It was a great, of course, to honor responsibility, but actually I've seen it all, and I've seen the challenges, and I've seen the struggle. And on a positive note, every country does a struggle with inclusivity, because in one way it's a human right. If we look at it from a human right perspective, we shouldn't really struggle with it because it's a given. But if we look at it from application and implementation, we really need to empower people to make sure that we make the best of the inclusion experience. This is in my humble view.
That's amazing. I absolutely agree with what you're saying when it comes to human rights, and it's a human right, education for all, for sure. And then how to feel that, how to fill the gap with inclusion is the challenging part, which obviously you guys are both doing such a wonderful job in. So same question for you, Dr. Shereen. Why you have such a strong interest in autism and special education?
Right. So, I mean, there were, I believe, two parts to that question. The first being, why did I take an interest? And then the second
Yeah.
being, to me, what does inclusion look like
Yes.
successful inclusion, right? So, as you had mentioned at the beginning when introducing you, Uzma, so yes, I did grow up with a younger autistic brother who's had quite the journey with inclusion here in the UAE. So, in 2001, he was the first autistic child in the UAE to receive formal mainstream school inclusion. So that was kind of like a process of inclusion supervised by the Ministry of Education. And actually, I think there were no laws even at the time. Federal law kind of came to power maybe closer to 2009. But yeah, I mean, so he did inclusion at the time where as Dr. Eman had mentioned, so it's just like a very different era. And at the time, my family line, specifically him, faced a lot of like attack. Like parents were concerned about having a child that was different, who was autistic in the classroom. I think they were afraid for their children. Teachers were not on board. So it's just such a massive journey to kind of like go from that to where we are here today. So that's kind of how things started out for me, just growing up with someone who is neurodivergent. We always saw things very, very differently to myself and also to my older brother. And then I obviously also had some volunteering opportunities across autism centers, across schools. I had friends that were autistic but didn't know they were autistic. So it's kind of like it started out quite personal. But what made me stay in autism research specifically is this really beautiful thing about the fact that the field of autism is always changing, And it's, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, our understanding has just morphed completely. So to give you a difference, to give you an example of one study, for example, that is just very, very like groundbreaking, I think, and can help shift our understanding of what it means to actually be autistic. An exciting study that was done a couple of years ago. So just a couple of years ago, even though autism is now 78, 79 years old, but this study was published last year, and it basically showed that as far as social communication is concerned, autistic people were actually effectively communicating with one another just as effectively as neurotypical people do. But problems happen when autistic people and neurotypical people communicate. And that is a very strong evidence of autism being a difference and not a disorder. If it was and it's characterized by issues in social communication, then autistic people should also struggle communicating with each other. It shouldn't
Mm.
be, breakdown shouldn't just happen between autistic people and neurotypical people. So that study, investigating social intelligence in autism, is very new. It's a very new wave of research, and just published a couple of years ago. Really tests our like initial understanding of it being, characterized by social communication deficits or social communication differences, and what can we do about that? And these are the kinds of adjustments that successful inclusion can make by, training peers. So we're talking about children, children in schools, parents, educators, teachers, on these communication differences. I think a lot of the work that needs to happen in inclusion needs to be autistic led. So we need to include actually autistic people, because they can give you the insights that we could not possibly do. We're researchers, we're community members, practitioners, families, parents, siblings, so on, but only those with a lived experience can really make that very necessary and unique contribution when it comes to inclusion. So that's kind of what really excited me about the field, the fact that it's like fast-paced, really, really changing, and will continue to change and expand our understanding. What successful inclusion looks like to me, as I just mentioned now. So number one, there needs to be like autistic-led initiatives. In the UK, for example, we're trialing a program that with autistic teachers. So using the insights of autistic teachers, hiring autistic teachers to teach autistic students, or hiring neurodivergent staff to teach neurodivergent children. Just very, very unique insights and techniques that come with that in a way that we couldn't possibly do. Good inclusion looks like training in neurodiversity for peers specifically. So there's a research study that's coming out in June this year. That was the first trial of implementing a neurodiversity teaching paradigm. So going into schools and teaching kids about neurodiversity. What's cool about that is that usually people will get training on specific things like ADHD and autism, but this is the first neurodiversity training kind of like model. So focusing on the differences that happen between people and how that's natural, and so people can also recognize that. So neurodiversity training for students, for teachers, for parents, autistic-led initiatives, hiring neurodivergent staff, and involving autistic students and neurodivergent pupils in their own learning, involving them in their education. There's a famous hashtag in the autistic community, nothing about us without us. And I think once we really start implementing that in an inclusion setting, a world of difference will happen.
Wow, this is so interesting. And really, from this conversation, I've learned it's not just doing the work as an outsider, it's really tapping into looking at the autistic adults or children and supporting them through their lived experience. And that's so crucial in not just in education, but in all aspects of life for them to thrive.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely. I think there
amazing.
are a lot of funding schemes that so related to neurodiversity that won't even fund you if your methods are not participatory. And so what that means is that you're involving the stakeholders. So you're researching with autistic people, not on autistic people. You're involving them very early on as decision makers in methods, How do we measure this? How do we ask this question? How can we adapt the way that we interview? So even like interviews is a very like famous method for qualitative kind of research. Yeah, well, interviewing autistic people, um, we need to adapt our methods, and work with autistic people has shown us how we can do that. What adjustments can we make in terms of communication, in terms of questions, in terms of methods, in terms of environmental adjustments that can be done. So yeah, a participatory approach in inclusion in everything to do with this agenda is really necessary moving forward.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. Beautiful. Thank you. That's amazing. And I still, I mean, I can continue with this conversation, but we'll just move on to the next question. But I can honestly continue on this question that I've asked. But I just want to know, I mean, we've talked about inclusive education. We've looked at, the ideal kind of setting. Um, the next question is really going to twist the last question I asked is, what if the school environment, what if the school environment does not work for the autistic child? What are your views on alternative education?
I would. Sorry, is it for me or for Shane?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Uh, Again, as I was talking to actually yesterday in preparation for this, I said, well, as you age, you develop this chilled attitude towards things. The advocate in me would actually say very bluntly and very simply, it is the responsibility of the school to cater for every child. Whether or not he has autism, this is a whole another matter, but it is actually our responsibility. Everybody should be educable, and we should set goals for every individual to come to school, achieve what he wants to achieve, and etc. Right. Now, implementation wise, as a person who's been training teachers and graduating teachers and supervising teachers all my life, and as a teacher myself, sometimes implementing certain things in theory, when it comes to practice, it can be very difficult. The beauty about autism is the uniqueness of each individual. When you meet one person with autism, you meet one person with autism. And this is, again, it kills all the stereotypes of, the characteristic, the share, the characteristics, etc. So now the whole world is going towards individuality and differentiation of instruction. The school environment must adhere or must meet every child need. When you look at, again, we can look at it the hard way by saying, oh, it will require fund, it will require more training. Children with autism have very unique and special needs, where actually they can be very particular about things. Anything you could, the glare in one of the glasses in the classroom can literally bring up very undesired behavior. Something that the teacher does not in a routinic way can develop. This is the stereotype of autism, really. But the reality is, research now, and I'm a researcher, I'm a film, believe in evidence, really. Research now shows that with very little adjustment, very little reasonable adjustment, actually they're not very demanding at all. And it's all about the willingness to learn. I've seen teachers who spend a lifetime trying to really look at every case carefully. It's it when you have it as a teacher, when you really try to work with the child. And I echo what Dr. Shereen said here, in working with the child. This is a person who's been living with his spectrum all his life. What do I know? So it's very simple. You talk to the person, and the research say that children as young as 4, even with those with some intellectual disabilities as well and cognitive challenges, they still are able to be involved in their own decision making. And because the children and people with autism, sometimes they can be very literal about expressing what they want and what they don't want. Sometimes it scares some of the teachers and people who are preparing for environmental changes in a school, because simply, you can spend a whole month and fund trying to secure a quiet corner for a person on the spectrum, and then he doesn't like it because, the feeling was not great, or the sensory issue or something like this. So why invest the time, energy, and money and waste all this without working with the person? So the whole new trend now is the person's voice, really. A person with autism is very capable to actually tell you what are his likes, what are his dislikes, and most of the time these are very manageable, reasonable, sometimes even cheaper adjustment. So I think we let away with the myth and taboo about the expense, the cost, the training. We will not be able to do this. Actually, we can do this. It's just a matter of working closely with each child to support each child as per his needs. He knows, family know. If a person is living with his abilities / disabilities, whatever, all his life, the least we can do to him is basically to try to get his opinion about his environmental change, differentiation of instruction, assessment, and etc. So this is my take on the school environmental changes to suit every child, including people with autism.
That's great. I like that. I like the fact that you've mentioned, from 4 years and and above, you
It's
can
true.
ask
This is
them.
research. This is not me. This is research. Actually, there's an actual research to say that I think we mistakenly think that we have to mother them. We have to, decide for them. We have to do this. As a matter of fact, out of all disabilities, and I've seen a lot of disabilities in my lifetime, is autism, and I can here say that many people on the spectrum are extremely decisive about what they want and what
Mm,
they don't want, what will work and what will not work. So why bend them? I think as human being, as a race, we are trying to grab them to our world to do what we want, how we want it, where we want it, when we want it. This is the life story of autism. We're
mm,
trying to do this really on their behalf, decide for them, get them to do this because we need them to talk like us, act like us, walk like us, study like us, even understand like us. Guess what? It's about time that we acknowledge that people are made differently, and they just it's whatever you want to call it. I was talking to somebody the other day. He said to me, "Miss, I'm from a parallel universe," and I'm like, you know what, I like that. You know what I mean? Whatever. It's just they are not this heroic people who can just twist things, and the savant, and they're able to do all sort of things, the Rain Man syndrome, as they say. And they are not really helpless and powerless. They are just a human beings with a very unique nature. We need to respect the nature. Once we respect the nature and respect the person, with the person before the disability, I think we'll be away. If we don't listen to what they will tell us, I think and again, looking at NASA now, and I would say 20% of all the people who work in NASA, apparently lately they've been saying that they may be on the spectrum. You know what I mean? And no wonder how the world is a better place by having people with autism in it.
that's beautiful. So really asking them, speaking to them is what I hear today, and getting them involved in decision making and not making decisions on behalf of them.
Yeah.
Amazing, absolutely. And the same question for you, Dr. Shereen. If the school system doesn't work for a child, what other ways can we educate them really?
Um, it doesn't. We have worldwide evidence to suggest that mainstream school settings are failing neurodivergent students. We have international statistics that show that even so. I know that. I mean, I've frequently received a comment that, well, if an autistic child goes to school, um, like, are they really that autistic, or like, I feel like that they're fine because they're in school, right? I mean, if someone managed to get to school, so I feel like they're fine on some level. The reality is that more cognitively abled students, autistic students, for example, are actually at much higher risk for mental health problems, and even 9 times more likely to attempt suicide. There's just a whole other aspect to things that people aren't necessarily familiar with. If your parameters are academic success, then you definitely need to, take a moment and try to expand your worldview of benefit here, and like what's at stake, or what is success really. So I get that, because from, like, just drawing on my personal background with my mom and my brother. So my mom was told during his diagnosis more than 25 years ago. So obviously our understanding of autism was null really at that stage, especially in like maybe the part of the world or this region. So she was told he's autistic. And what that means is that he won't be able to go to school. Literally what autism meant to that uh, person, that you know, in that moment. So, and my mom, upon hearing this, fainted, as I was told later on, many years later, because to her, like an immigrant mother that had, like, moved from her country to this country for whatever better opportunities for your children, so on, so on. So to suddenly hear that you won't be able to access education, um, it was just so devastating. But then, and like a big part of that journey was fighting for their rights for inclusion. Yes, but we need to understand that once you're in a mainstream school setting, it's honestly like the battle has just begun. I'd like to use kind of like a reference from nature to better put this into perspective for the parents that might be listening or even the educators. So I want you to picture with me, and I've come across this analogy that was used by my PhD supervisor, Dr. Sue Fletcher Watson, at a recent talk that was about neurodiversity. So picture like, just maybe like six different types of no four different types of trees, right? So the first type of tree is an apple tree, but you can see like so I want you to like see three different types of apple trees, but they're all apple trees, but they're just like a bit different. Maybe they have like more branches, more leaves, less apples, but it's just the same type of tree. Think of those trees as us, typically developing, and we make up the majority of the population. And then I want you to picture a set of three different trees, neurodivergent trees. So a cherry blossom tree, a palm tree, and a willow tree. So those three trees are very, very different types of trees. They diverge from the mainstream type of apple trees. And you need to understand that there are differences even between apple trees. So even us, there are differences between us. But the differences between, say, a palm tree and an apple tree is much more observable. So we really hone in on those differences because they're much larger than the differences, for example, between two apple trees. All trees have equal value. No tree is superior than another tree, right? I think you would agree with that. An apple tree, a palm tree, a cherry, a blossom tree, they all have these are all naturally occurring. None of them are, necessarily a disorder or there's something like wrong with them. They're naturally occurring in nature. They all have equal value and they all have a purpose. But the success, like the outcome for each tree is determined by the match between the environment and the needs of the tree. So a palm tree needs a very dry, hot, humid kind of like, temperature and earth to flourish. In contrast, a willow tree actually needs a lot of water. So you cannot just plant a palm tree in an area that has like lots of water or vice versa and expect it to grow. So it is the environment and the adjustments that we make to the environment that really will dictate the outcome for these trees, for these people. The presence of all of these trees together is evidence of strength in diversity. So imagine if you only had one type of tree. Is this a rich biodome? Definitely not. So the fact that we're all together, and by the way, neurodiversity is everyone. So when somebody says like this is a neurodiverse person, that's signaling confusion about that term. So neurodiversity is everyone, all types of the brains. But people who diverge from the typical kind of like brain are neurodivergent. So the presence of all of us together as a species is what enriches us. And that's really something that takes me to the next point when you say what are kind of like alternative ways. So I need you to recognize that formal mainstream school settings might not be the right soil or the ground for your tree, for your child. So that might not be the most suitable environment. As the professor just mentioned now, definitely school has a role here to make the necessary adjustments in terms of the things that I was like talking about in terms of trainings, in terms of learning from autistic people how to communicate more effectively. And by the way, autistic people are actually the best communicators that I've seen when it comes to precise, clear, coherent communication. I can't just tell my younger brother, I'll meet you in the afternoon. He'll understand, I'll meet you at 2, I'll meet you at 3. So it's just super clear. And there's a lot of, even like studies that highlight that autistic people make better managers than typically developing the managers, just because of the level of like precision, coherence, bluntness, honesty, worthiness. So I just need parents to, or educators to recognize the risks that just because somebody is in school doesn't mean they're doing well. In fact, more cognitively able students are at higher risk for so many issues. And I also want people to recognize the data that we have on masking, so something called camouflaging. So there's a good body of, you know, like uh, growing a wave that shows that autistic people camouflage their traits to fit in with neurotypical people, whether they're more cognitively abled or less cognitively able. But we still need a lot more data because it's just a very, very new wave of research. So in schools in particular, they found that autistic people tend to mask. So, for example, things like stimming, needing to flap or do sounds or repeat your speech. So all different types of stimming that they would like hold that back, hold that in to appear more normal and therefore fit in more and be subject to less like bullying difficulties that people wouldn't notice that they're like too different. Sometimes they even adapt their communication. They force eye contact, which we know can be very painful for autistic people. So I just want educators and parents to think about what it means to actually subject your child to mainstream school, just in any type of like regard, just into consideration, because being in school is really not a measure of any type of uh, success. And there's so much that schools can do, as we've all highlighted here. The core thing that keeps being said: a participatory approach. Ask, involve them. They are decision makers. They are your compass, basically, moving forward.
That's great. I think that the question that leads me to now, the next question I have actually is, do you think there may be a cultural difference in this as well? Because you've mentioned, school, like the example of the trees, and I can share my experience as well for my own son. He's not at school because it didn't work for him. But do you think there could be some kind of cultural, I don't know, like just an exception or uh, just an idea or an idea that they may have that school is the answer, school is the way forward, even though it may be somewhat damaging for the child. And I'm going to use that word not lightly, actually, just from my experience, it could be damaging.
Mm.
Should I go, or Shireen would like to go
Please, no,
ahead?
no, please.
Um, Again, having worked in 3 different cultures and researched, did lots of cross-cultural studies on this. There is bad news and good news. Yani the good news is actually many cultures share the same interest in autism. Autism is a puzzle, and people are interested in it. Some people like touch it from far away, and some people like go in deep, and they wanted to do justice to many people with autism. So that most the cultures are good willing, and they wanted to do difference in the lives of people with autism. But the bad news is, and this is also research based, is some culture they tend to be more judgmental on those who are differently able than others. And for example, in very without naming any cultures, of course, in very combative cultures, you probably wonder what are the odds or the chances of a child who's really struggling with a specific area of curriculum and can't, and if this is a culture where they have to succeed in all subjects and they have to do well, and for example, looking at workers or the industrial worker, for example, as a second class rather than a first class, you probably wouldn't get the same chances as some more tolerant cultures where they actually appreciate differences and value this, and they feel that every member of society, regardless of his work, is this. I recall that we've had an experience here in our university about 15 years ago, where we've employed a person on the spectrum in the library, actually, because we sat with him and we've asked him. Of course, there was no formal education due to all what Shireen was just saying and what I was saying. The person really struggled with the system, full stop, and just could not make it through. Extremely bright individual who would a bookworm. You give him any title in the universe, and he would tell you who the author and what he to do. interest-based, etc. So we thought at that time, giving him a chance, would be the library would be the place. And guess what? Currently the person is actually giving workshops for people in the library about how to classify. His classification system is so sound and so thorough and so amazing that sometimes it stunned us, and it's a success story. So fitting, I'll go again about what is the whole purpose of education. Luckily, we've managed as a place to really, as an employer, to appreciate that he did not really have the qualification required, and he was just an assistant librarian rather than a qualified full librarian. And we believed in his abilities, etc. And he basically got the best in him, because on another note, as we Shereen tell you, the whole new wave now of why are we locking people in libraries? Why are we giving them a musician job where they only be with a violin for the rest of their life, or looking at the screen for the rest of their life? And again, it's about what people want and what people can do, and it's about the comfort. His comfort zone was at that time, and he slowly came. We did not seek change. We just wanted to give this person an opportunity and to make the best of his ability. And that should be really the goal. We just sometimes we drift, and we employ ourselves as guardians for all people with autism, that we have to just get them to talk like us and do like us and work like us, and we consider anything else as a failure, and that defeats the whole purpose of education, because education really is about achieving what you come here to achieve. I don't know about when we went to school. When I went to school, I went with people. If they look at me now, I have dyslexia, for example. Not many people know that, but I made it in academia. You know what I mean? And I just laugh with my students when I struggle on the board with, and some, is that correct? Is that spelled correctly? And we just, if I'm tired, I can't spell, live with that. You know what I mean? So we're all neurodiverse, as Shereen said. And I really believe that we should just celebrate the diversity and really taking a bit, hold our horses a little bit about what should happen, and start to say what could happen, because these are two different things. And once we give people the wings, they fly. And at the moment, we're clipping so many wings by putting, a cap on their abilities.
Wow, I really like that. So tapping into their interests and really figuring out what they want. I really like that. Can you share, your experience so far in the UAE, in this field? So, Dr. Shereen?
Uh,
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
so,
That's
yeah.
all right. Go ahead.
No,
Yeah,
it's you.
go.
No,
Your experience, yeah. So, with respect to inclusion, you mean?
Yeah.
Right. Uh, my experience varies depending on the lens that I use to look at inclusion. So if I look through the lens of a sibling of an autistic brother who went to mainstream school maybe like 25 plus years ago, it's just a very different lens than a neurodiversity researcher today that is working with trying to work with autistic communities and members of our um, public to drive a very different agenda than the one that we had many years ago. Um, the thing is, I like to think that there are like 5 levels, and the first one is awareness, followed by, so awareness is basically like we're aware that there are autistic people among us, and we can identify like just like some key features, for example. This is followed by acceptance, so you accept that those people are different and you include them into your circle or society in all its forms, education, the workplace, so on. So you accept those differences. The next stage, kind of like, advancing up. So we start with awareness and then we move on to acceptance, is to appreciate the differences that you've just accepted right now as value adding. So because we're different, it's actually better for us. We're seeing the world in, just like very different ways. This is a strength. It's adding to us. We're getting more value as a result of this. Um, the next stage would be to go for empowerment. So when society has reached this stage, that means that you've used your tools and resources, you've made the necessary adjustments and adaptations to empower those with a lived experience to thrive, not just survive. And that could be, this is, for example, one of the reasons why I was raised on the wide web extension that I was just talking about at the beginning, because the extension has adapted how we use the web so that it becomes more accessible, so that all different types of people can actually use this to flourish, especially because we use it on a day-to-day basis for homework, for work, for meetings, for online gaming. So we make the necessary adjustments to our technology, our resources, our tools to empower those who are different, to basically take their own path. And finally, advocacy. If you've done such a good job with raising awareness, accepting those people, appreciating them, empowering them, then you have equipped them with self advocacy, that they can advocate for themselves. They can now take the leadership position when it comes to this this whole agenda, and we are just pure uh, allies, really. So I think my experience in the UAE so far is that we're very much still stuck on awareness level one, and we really need to push. And this is like very much depicted even in like ter- terminology, even like World Awareness Month. We're aware that there are autistic people, and we're aware of those, like key features. And so a lot of communities worldwide have shifted to World Acceptance Month, so on, so on. I mean, these are just terms, but if we look beyond that, the agenda that these terms drive is one of acceptance, appreciation, empowerment, and it affects the direction that you take, which will affect your agenda. Your agenda will affect the funding that you apply for, and funding will determine where the money is going. Is it going towards the support of those people, or is it going towards like finding a cure, for example, right? So it's just two completely different worldviews. So my experience in the UAE is that we've definitely come a long way, because my brother first entered mainstream schools in 2001, and prior to that, we had like a whole journey as well in the UAE. So the ministry's been super receptive, peers, educators, policymakers, but it's just about making that shift now to acceptance and empowering agenda that, number one, really involves autistic people. So hire autistic people, teachers, researchers in your university, in your school. Encourage self advocacy. This is a key message that I would give to parents and educators. A lot of the times I see parents pairing their neurodivergent child with a typically developing child to like play with. So they're just like really focused on the getting these two to play, and less so two neurodivergent kids together. Now, obviously, this doesn't apply. This is not a generalization, but it's just more like, I think some families, including mine, many years ago, thought that if we increase those opportunities between neurotypical and neurodivergent, that it would actually be better for my brother. He would fit in better. The reality is, autistic people need each other. So if you can build a tribe that fosters um, just a sense of like, they have a shared experience of the world, and if they come together and you educate them on what it means to be who you are, and this is what is available to you, and this is what we know, they can really come together to advocate for themselves down the line. So I think my experience so far in the UAE has been phenomenal, because we've come a long way, and we are that family that basically, I just like started out with very little here, and kind of like paved certain aspects of inclusion through those experimental paradigms. At the same time, I think we now really need to take the next step, and take that awareness agenda, which has been pending for a really long time. I mean, autism has been around for close to 80 years now, and worldwide, I think we're still, in many the parts of the world, still stuck on awareness, and that I feel like we should be more confident in making that shift now to acceptance, appreciation, empowerment, and advocacy through funding, through research, through community engagement, and through talks like this.
This is great. I love this. I like the way you've just explained that so well, and how your experience and how we can move forward as well. Um, in our communities. That's great. Thank you. And the same question for you, Professor Iman. What is your experience so far in the UAE?
again, been there, done that, seen it all, and and looking at the development, very positive things that is happening. A lot of I definitely share with Shereen about moving away from just awareness. I think we're far and above and beyond this. We now we now need to go further into empowerment, because though with young people that we were advocating for 20 years ago, now they are adults and they need to make their own living, and they need to get married and have families, or to be sustained, or to be independent, or whatever. So we can't just be stuck in the awareness book. But I actually have a slight complementing view to this, which actually continue with the awareness as well. It's like parallel, and at the same time move forward. Working, I gave TEDx talk the other day about empowerment in higher education. For example, we have issues with a ceiling. Once people never had a problem with inclusion in the elementary schools, and then here comes the middle schools, and we have an issue, challenges in there. And when it comes to a secondary school, for example, where only a fraction of people on the spectrum can actually go into the high school, those who would be surviving the SATs and the examination, etc. While those, for example, with cognitive issues, probably they wouldn't make it. And then we have issues with where to put them and where to place them and else. So I think we really need to, of course, the National Policy for People of Determination 2017 is amazing, and it is aligned. I'm a United Nations consultant, so I work also with the other side. And when we write policies, I had the honor to write the 2030 policy for the inclusion policy for the world, and actually knowing where the world is going, I can see the UAE is doing an amazing job in policy-wise. However, policies alone are not enough. We really need to, work further into implementing what's in the policies. For example, if you look at the national policies for people of determination to empower people, it's actually called that, to empower people of determination, 2017. One is about, for example, sport and rehabilitation. Of course, we came a very long way in this, but then we need to have even balance in this. When it comes, for example, to education, we still have issues. As an educationist, universities now, for example, are taking people on the spectrum as courteous, as it is a right, really. And there will be a policy that will be issues. You'll be glad to know that next year from the Ministry of Higher Education on how universities cannot turn a person on the spectrum away, and they have to cater for them. And that will require a lot of training, a lot of input, a lot of fund, a lot of research, a lot of working with people on how to best cater for them. Again, we have to advocate on that. We have a couple of people on the spectrum here in our universities, and they are attending. But then there are issues with GPAs. There are issues with modification of instruction. Every subject is a hurdle, and we have to go with every subject and every single one. The good news is the university is doing its best to do this. But again, there is a lot to be done. If every principal in every school doesn't believe that inclusion is a right for all children, including those on the spectrum, we will not get anywhere. If people still think that it's, if people still think that it's it's nice, as you say, we should be doing this. No, we have to do this. These are two different things. And I always, when I write to schools, when I advocate, when I write to schools, when I have a child who's missed out an opportunity, or one of the schools saying that, it's easy to say I cannot cater for the child than saying that I'm breaking the law. But now we have laws and regulation. So it is quite the hand in hand between, I would advocate that, yes, the Emirates came a long way, but there is a hand in hand should be between the policy and the application of the policy and the implementation of the policy. Simplify the policy, make a white blueprint, whatever, pink print, and, advocate. When I teach teachers about this, I always say, to have proper inclusion, there is a car with 4 wheels. The policy is just one wheel in the car. There is a practice, there is place, and there is a practitioner himself. There is no way you can drive a car with one wheel. So although we came a very long way with in policy wise, and I must say I'm very proud as one of the people who actually reviewed such policies and have seen it being cooked in the oven, had the honor to be involved in this. I would say we came a very long way, but actually I think it's it's a faster track if we don't have the practice that goes with this and the flow chart. What do we do with a person if? What do we do with a person if? We need to have exit routes. We need to have vocational education. We need to appreciate the value of alternative means of education. We need to value homeschooling as well. We need to give options to parents and not put a cap. Inclusivity doesn't mean that you have to take your child into the mainstream school. It's about the best fit for the child, and it's about inclusivity in the society rather than in the school. School is only one part of that. So I think we came a long way. I'm trying to be optimistic, but on another note, I think there is a lot to be done as well.
Yes.
Wow, this is so interesting. I can see so many different angles to the conversation here and how to, I mean, it brings me back again to looking at the person, looking at that individual and going with what they need and what their personalized needs would be, and not looking at the system as a whole for them, but really tapping into the individual. That's great. I mean, I'm really conscious about the time here as well, Jacob. I believe we only have 4 minutes. Um, I mean, this is going to be a quick last question, and we have a question. I could see a question pop up in the chat too, and we'll go to question and answer soon. Last question, very briefly, what future projects do you have planned? You know, Dr. Shereen, if you can quickly mention, and we'll go on to Professor Eman after that, please.
So more neurodiversity research, which is very much in its infancy in this part of the world, particularly with a focus on a participatory approach. So as I mentioned, that means working with autistic people. In order for me to do that, we need to have self-advocacy here, which once again, minimal to non-existent. So that's one of my main goals moving forward, is to kind of build the UAE's first self-advocacy network for autistic people, and really just go from there, where they would dictate their needs to us as researchers, and we can direct our funding, our knowledge, our skills towards advancing the agenda that's a priority for them, not for us.
That's great. Thank you. And Professor Iman?
I think I'm quite focused at the moment working with the government here in the UAE, mainly the government of Dubai, and there are talks also to other local education authorities and local social development authority about the licensure for those who are working with people on the spectrum as well, people with disability in general. And, there is a lot to be said here about professionalism. And, with the lack of resources, sometimes people may hire a person who is not really bringing the best in a child or an adult with autism, and I'm really concerned about this. I wake up in the middle of the night actually thinking about that. So regulating, the standards that are required for people who are working in the field. I think this is now my main issue. Of course, researching, supervising a couple of dissertations, and one of them actually on neurodiversity, and using multiple intelligence, for example, to support people on the spectrum and making the best of their ability. Working with another research student as well on a longitudinal study looking at where in the brain is autism again, and how this affects education. People are trying to locate, what would be the best, the best to be done for a person on the spectrum, using his full potentials, taking into account, of course, that every individual is individual at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was such an insightful discussion that we've had today. I can't believe we're running out of time. It's already an hour. But Jacob, do we have any questions? I can see one that did pop up in the chat. We can go on to Q&A now, Jacob.
Yes, well, thank you very much. And I think we are aware of the time. We've got 1 minute. We don't want to keep you guys too long. But this comment and question from Minoti, I think, Minoti Abraham. Interesting talk. And what skills can be taught to a 23-year-old with autism? He was at school with other students of determination, but made minimal progress. What life skills can be taught to him?
I guess, Shereen would be more closer to this, because you have how old is your brother now? He must be in his 20s now.
He's 32.
My God, I thought, wow, yeah, like time fly. I'll talk from the humble perspective as an educationist. Again, life skills, basically a list of things that would arm this person to face life, be independent, independence. Going to going to the shops, finding his own. I don't know about his ability, obviously, but whichever way to support this person to become as independent, freely earning his own living, that would be the skills required. And of course, the list goes on and on and on. I can talk all day, but certainly, I think we're shifting the notion now into fitting into society, because some society assemblies are difficult to be fit in, as they say. It's more about making sure that he is as independent as possible, and these are the skills that you would need. with all the way from daily needs all the way to social development, making friends, supporting himself financially. Financial empowerment now is the key to people on the spectrum, because there is an issue. Some people on the spectrum live and die, depending on other people. If you don't feed them, they don't eat. If you don't spend on them, they don't get, supported. And that's very worrying, actually. So I would say the life skills that, that person would need is the skills that would equip him to be as independent as possible.
That's great. Thank you. Wow. Do you have
Something,
any, would you like to add
yeah,
anything, Dr. Shereen, to this
no,
question?
I noticed that. So the in the question, so there's a statement that he was at a school with other students of determination, but made minimal progress. So to me, there's kind of like there's an assumption that, okay, so if my child is among other people of determination, I would expect to see some progress here, or that would be the right environment to facilitate support or independence. I just want to flag that people of determination is a umbrella term. It's a very wide term. There's like 50 disabilities that can, like, just even at the top of my head, go under that term. So for that reason, because the support in the classroom is not specific for autistic students, that is a key thing to keep in mind, that I really don't think there is such a thing as like kind of like a POD, a people of determination, like way of learning, way of thinking. Each disability or each condition is associated with like key strengths, key, a key range of like strengths and difficulties. So you wouldn't necessarily apply something that is being used, for example, to teach somebody with ADHD only, for example, to somebody who is just autistic, or maybe autistic and has something else, for example, another comorbid condition. So just the presence of your child being the present among other students with a number of different types of disabilities isn't necessarily kind of like a pathway for more progress. So that's number one. The thing that I would flag is, as talked about, so what type of skills? I mean, really, obviously, like the most important skills I imagine for parents that recognize that we won't be around forever are life skills that can help the child be a bit more independent. But the challenge here is like how do you transfer those skills, or like how do you approach those skills? And I would say kind of like the number one thing that you would need to tap into as a parent are your child's strengths. We often attend talks and conferences and the workshops about autism that are very much focused on like a deficit model. Like these are the challenges that they have, but we rarely talk about the strengths that they have. And that's really key, because if you know the person's strengths, you can find a way to adapt whatever it is that you're trying to teach them in a way that works best for them. So for example, autistic people, generally speaking, very strong visual learners, pay a lot of attention to details, are very logical in their thinking, can tend to come up with kind of like very like novel ways to approach something, the same thing that maybe like we would approach, have a set of like kind of very focused or special areas that they're very kind of like interested in. So I would say tap into your child's strengths in terms of how he learns, what he likes to do and how he interacts, and then start implementing, like, for example, those core teaching areas. It could be something so simple as teaching somebody how to drink using visual supports, for example. So tap into your child's strengths and leverage that to teach them the life skills that you want to teach them.
Wow, this is great. Thank you so much. Okay, somebody's asking here, can we communicate with the guest speakers via email?
I'm very happy to. I can just write it here in the chat, and then I'll be more than happy to do this. Or maybe Jacob can kindly just. You're probably better than me in doing this. Can you just kindly put it somewhere where people can access it? I have no problem at all.
That's great. This has been so beneficial. For me, I've learned so much today, and I'm sure the audience has taken away some crucial information. I'm really grateful. Thank you for joining us today. And we have gone over our time, but I honestly can talk about this forever. This topic is of my, it's very personal to me. So I will like to wrap up now because I'm conscious of the time. But thank you guys so much. Thank you for joining us in the live today. And we really appreciate your time and your presence today and your knowledge and expertise in the field.
Okay, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys. Jacob,
Okay,
anything else
bye-bye.
before we wrap up? Thank you.
Thank you.